Happy Wednesday, everybody. We are halfway to the weekend. I'm your host, Jessie Coffield. Still no Emerson Latzia. You are watching The Sweat. Here's what's on tap for you today. 4-game slate in the NHL. We're going to break that down with our hockey panel. Obviously, we'll break down the latest NFL news. Plus, we've got to discuss the Arnold Palmer Invitational at Bay Hill, which tees off tomorrow. But we're going to start in the association with our NBA panel. DraftKings contributor Gary Thorne, DK Live Junior Sports editor Chinmay Vaidya, and RotoWire's Nick Whalen. Fellas, it is NBA shoot-around time. So we are breaking down tonight's best DFS and Sportsbook plays for the 8-game slate. So let's start with DFS. Garian, who is your absolute must-roster favorite player tonight?
Yes, we've got the 4 absolute studs up over 11K tonight. And I think if you're trying to figure out which of those 4 you're starting your lineups with, I'm probably going to lean towards Giannis. The potential up-tempo script of that Denver OKC game is a little enticing, but as we saw in the Nuggets' last contest against Portland, Jokic might only play like 26 minutes. He still grabbed, I think it was like 18 rebounds in those 26 minutes, but he only scored 8 points, and he was held under 50 DraftKings points. Giannis, this should be a highly competitive game against the Heat. Obviously, the Heat are not an opponent you love to face in a DFS perspective, but Milwaukee kind of provide their own environment. They are an up-tempo team. They are 5th in pace across the last 10 games. That has been consistent across the entirety of the season. And Giannis has kind of reached that Jokic territory of efficiency in the last little bit. His last 11 starts, he's averaging 1.84 DraftKings points per minute played. So if he's in a situation tonight where he's getting anywhere close to 35 minutes in a competitive script against a team Milwaukee has to catch in the Eastern Conference playoff standings, he's going to have a massive night. So I think Giannis is my 1-8 on Wednesday.
All right, Chinmay, are you going with one of those 4 studs who are over 11K?
I think I have to. And I think it's obvious, when you have the top 3 front runners for MVP, those are the guys that you have to go with. And the Sixers and Nuggets are likely going to be in blowout games, but I'm going to go with James Harden as the perimeter guy. I think he has more upside than Embiid in terms of 3-pointers and assists, and he's played really well in his first 2 games in Philly. And both of those guys are good plays, but I really like James Harden in this one. I think he has continued to show why he is one of the best players in the league when he's right, and he's finally right in Philadelphia. So James Harden has a little more upside than Embiid to me, so I'm going to go with the beard.
All right, Nick, who is your absolute must-roster favorite player tonight?
Yeah, I think for me it would be Harden as well. I kind of want to ride this out, this, I guess honeymoon period that he has with the 76ers where, I think a lot of people thought, former MVP James Harden, like that guy was gone. A lot of people thought, as he moved into his kind of closer to his mid-30s, we were going to see a different phase of James Harden's career. And as it turns out, he just wasn't really trying in Brooklyn and could immediately flip that switch. And we've seen it in his first 2 games with the Sixers. So, James Harden looks like 2018 MVP James Harden. So I want to ride this out as long as I can. You can't necessarily depend on getting 16 assists and 5 steals like he had against the Knicks in their last game. That's not going to happen every night, but the points should be there, the rebound should be there, and 8 to 12 assists is pretty realistic on a nightly basis. So he's my favorite, pay up play on this slate. I'd also look at SGA against Denver. He's at 10K. The Thunder have, I think, 7 guys already ruled out of this game. More could possibly be coming before tip-off. So it's going to be the SGA show. No Dort, no Giddey. Basically, as long as OKC can keep this game respectable and can justify keeping SGA in the game, he's going to be by far, far and away the main option for that team.
All right, Chinmay, so you're paying up for the beard. He's going to cost you $11,200. So who's shaping up to be the best value play for you?
I really like Cameron Johnson, the small forward on the Suns. I believe he's in the 5K range right now. 19-3-3 in his last 3 games, which are all starts. And his shooting splits are 50, 40, and 100. He hasn't missed a free throw in that time. The Suns really want to get him involved in their offense. And if we saw, remember last year in the finals, they really lost those games, not because the stars were not performing, but because these role guys like Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson weren't giving them that production. So with Chris Paul out now for basically the rest of the regular season, I expect the Suns to keep having Cameron Johnson involved in their offense. So I'm going to go with him as the value play tonight.
All right, Nick, you got to give us some value here. Where are you going?
Yeah, Kevin Love is one guy who jumps out, and it's been a little bit more feast or famine of late with Kevin Love than you'd like. He was so consistent, for the first 50-odd games of the year, and it kind of hit the skids a little bit around the All-Star break, but bounced back in a big way against Minnesota earlier this week. So hopefully he's back on track. I think he's a pretty solid value at 5,500. Other than that, I'm going to look to that OKC game. Like I mentioned, I think it could get ugly. Denver should win this one fairly easily. This is one of 4 games on the slate that currently has a spread of at least 10.5. So they're 4 games we project to be close, 4 games we project to be blowouts. This is one of them, but there's going to be some value here. I mean, someone has to start alongside SGA. Someone has to play 25 plus minutes. And I think 2 of those guys are Alexei Pokusevski, who's at 4,100. I think he's probably going to start at small forward. They're virtually out of options there. And then Isaiah Roby, who not too long ago was essentially exiled from this team, was spending time in the G League. And now here we are, and he's back as the starting center pretty much every night. So neither of those guys are super exciting. Neither of those guys are players you want to roster in season long. But when they're at 4,100 and 4,400 respectively, they make for pretty solid DFS values.
All right, Gary, and who do you think is a solid DFS value tonight?
Yeah, I think you have to go to that Thunder game. They're just missing so many people, and I think Nick mentioned the 2 guys who I feel safest about. I think Roby got into some foul trouble in his last game. That is obviously a very concerning thing going up against Nikola Jokic tonight. Only played 20 minutes in his last game, and then Olivier Sarr came in and played like 25. So, I mean, maybe if you think Roby's going to stay out of foul trouble, you go with Roby. If you think he's going to get into foul trouble, Sarr could be a little enticing, although very dangerous, someone whose floor is just non-existent. In that same way, I think Poku has actually been playing like quietly the best basketball of his career the past month or so. Since the beginning of February, he's averaging over a DraftKings point per minute. So again, I think those 2 guys are the safe plays, but I'm sorry if I've talked about Vic Krejci way too much on this show. I mean, I know I bring him up every single day, but I think Krejci is kind of quietly maybe the best value play on this slate. He is the bare minimum at 3K. And when Aaron Wiggins, who started their last game against the Kings, got hurt in the middle of the first quarter and was unable to return to that game, it was Krejci who started in his place in the second half and played all 12 minutes of the third quarter. That's how desperate the Thunder are for just warm bodies at this point. He finished that game 10 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, almost 30 minutes played. Was 0 of 6 from 3-point range. So if he can just knock in a couple of those threes, you're probably looking at like 8x, 9x value from this guy who I had definitely heard of before this morning.
Okay, heading over to the sports book. Nick, is there like a game total that you're going to be targeting? Kings Pelicans has the highest total on the slate with 235.5.
Yeah, these are tough. I normally there's 1 or 2 that jump out, but with the amount of potential blowouts, I mean, there's just kind of so much going through your head as far as what the game script is going to be in some of these. You mentioned that Pels Kings game over 230 or 235.5 is the total. I think I would go over on that. I mean, Sacramento has gone over in almost 60% of its road games this season. That Pelicans offense starting to look a lot better since the arrival of CJ McCollum. They're a top 10 offense over the last 10 games. This just feels like a game that you're going to check, whatever app you use at like 10:30 tonight, and it's going to be like 135 to 128. I can't provide any evidence as to why that's going to happen, but it just seems like a game that's going to get out of control. The other one that I'm keeping an eye on is I kind of like the under. 229.5 was the last number I saw in Utah and Houston tonight. And, this is essentially banking on this being a massive blowout in favor of the Utah Jazz, because the Utah offense should be able to score at will. Houston has been by far the worst defense in the NBA over its last 10. Utah third in offense in that span, but the Jazz play really slowly. Houston's missing some key pieces. Kevin Porter likely to sit tonight. Eric Gordon expected to sit out on a back-to-back. I don't think Houston is going to hold up its end of the bargain here. So even if Utah, scores in the 120s, I think this could be a game where Houston struggles to get over 100.
All right, Garion, tough to choose here, but do you have one that you're targeting?
Yeah, I think I'm going to take the under in that Charlotte-Cleveland game. It's 217.5 right now. Generally speaking, taking unders in Hornets games has been a bad idea, although they have been trending towards the under lately. They are actually 9-4 to the under in their last 13 games, primarily because despite the fact they continue to run at a very up-tempo pace, they've had the worst offensive rating in the Eastern Conference in that span of time. They are just having a really hard time scoring the basketball, whereas Cleveland has always kind of leaned towards the under this season. They are a defensive-based basketball team. 61% of their games have gone to the under this season. That is the highest mark of any Eastern Conference team. And they've been playing some real 90s basketball without their point guards. A lot of 92 to 86 kind of games the past couple of weeks. So obviously, keep an eye on Darius Garland. He is questionable for this game. If he does play, I'm a little less inclined to chase this number. But if we're looking at 48 minutes of Brandon Goodwin and Tim Frazier, I just don't think there's enough offensive potential in this game to get over this number.
Yeah, that one already creeping up to 218.5, but odds and lines are subject to change. Chinmay, is there a game total that you're targeting?
Yeah, I like the Heat Bucks over, and I know that can be against conventional wisdom. Miami is one of the better defensive teams in the league, and Milwaukee, we know what they're capable of defensively, but the Heat have gone over in 2 of their last 3 games, and even with Kyle Lowry out again, I like Gabe Vincent and Tyler Hero to step up and have big games again. And the Bucks have gone over in 8 straight games prior to their under against Charlotte, as we just mentioned, has been playing some pretty rough basketball of late. So I like the Heat and the Bucks over. If it goes a couple more points up, I might trend away from that. But as of right now, I think it's sitting at a pretty nice total, and that's the one that I'm looking at right now.
Okay, Kieran, what's a spread or money line that you're looking at tonight?
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be a popular one, but I'm going to go with the Pelicans -6 against the Kings. They're just playing some really nice basketball right now. They've got the second best net rating in the NBA across their last 5 games, outscoring teams by 11.2 points per 100 possessions. You want to pull that back to 10 games, they're still outscoring their opponents by 6.6 points per 100 possessions. That's a really healthy number, whereas Sacramento is Sacramento. So they've been struggling, and they haven't looked good defensively. It's a relatively big number for this Pelicans team. I understand that, but they've also been 5-1-1 ATS their past 7 games as a favorite. So they've been taking advantage of these games they should win as of late. And with the Lakers continuing to lose, I mean, this is a motivated team. They are gunning for that play-in tournament. So I think they're going to take care of business tonight.
Chinmay, biggest spread on the slate is that Thunder Nuggets game, 14.5.
Yeah, you probably want to avoid those spreads in double digits where you get random events happening and teams go on runs late, and it's a blowout game. The team up big is sitting their best players. But I like Sixers and Nuggets, and you can probably parlay with some player props for Embiid, Harden, and Jokic in those games and get better odds. So I like Nuggets and Sixers, either spread or money line, but also make sure that you bring in some player props in there and parlay that with either Harden, Embiid, or Jokic. I believe Jokic triple-double is always going to be plus money, so that might be a good one to take a gamble on with the spread or money line in that game as well.
All right, Nick, you got a spread or money line that you're looking at tonight?
Yeah, I mean, normally I would agree that some of these big-time spreads are stayaways, but I think a couple of these are just such big mismatches that, even if you get a late rally by the team that's down big, maybe at halftime or at the end of the third, I still think you could feel okay about covering, a 14-point spread if you're the Utah Jazz, or 14.5 if you're Denver. I think Utah's the team that I probably trust a little more here. I mean, Denver certainly should and will win this game against OKC, but there's a kind of a path there to Denver playing with his food a little bit and maybe not turning this one into a complete blowout. But man, I think Utah on the road at Houston is a really, really good spot for the Jazz. Like I said, the Rockets are likely going to be missing 2 starters. They're not a good team anyway. They're the worst defense in the league. Again, even if they turn things over to Josh Christopher or whoever in the fourth quarter, if it's a 25-point game going into the fourth, I just don't see them, mounting that kind of run. So never feel great, when you're laying 2 touchdowns in a game like this, but I really like Utah -14 on the road.
All right, good stuff, guys. Appreciate it. As always, we're going to take a quick break here on the sweat. Then we're going to break down tonight's hockey slate, so stay tuned. I've got a RotoWire duo joining me now, AJ Scholes and Paul Bruno. Guys, 4-game NHL slate tonight. Let's help the people make sense of it. So, starting in DFS, who is the top center to play on tonight's slate, AJ? The most expensive guy, Austin Matthews, $9K.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to argue against using Matthews with just how great he's been lately. But I think I want to spend up in a few other spots. So I'm going to go down just a little bit here in price. I'm going to stick with Toronto and instead look at John Tavares at 5,900. I mean, that's a huge discount compared to Matthews. Now, obviously, Tavares has a 13-game goal drought. That's a bit of a concern, but he's got 10 helpers over that stretch. And last time he faced Buffalo, he got a goal and an assist. It's a good, matchup. It's probably the best matchup on the slate here. So to hope that Tavares can maybe break out of it, still get a piece of the Leafs without having to go all the way up to Matthews, I think makes sense in this one.
Paul, are you going all the way up to Matthews, or do you want to save some money at the center position?
You know what? First of all, hats off to AJ. I think that's a great idea. I've been thinking about it all morning, so I'm glad he brought it up. I think Matthews is an outstanding play at 9,000. He's the best scorer in hockey. 41 shots on goal in his last 10 games played. Just consistency personified. He's going to win the Rocket Richard Trophy going away. And you might pair him, though, with a guy like Tavares if you want to double down on the Leafs, or you can go to the lower end of that spectrum and pick a guy like Anze Kopitar out as well. First line center for LA. He's been a model of consistency as well, with 12 points in his last 10 games played and pouring 32 shots on goal. Dallas hasn't been exactly the button-down defensive team that they've been in the past, so that might be a good pairing. Alternatively, go contrarian and take the combination of Hintz and Thompson from Dallas and Buffalo, respectively, for a combined total of $13,100. They're both scoring as well. So it's high-low with the favorites, or in the middle with the two guys that are playing against them tonight for me.
All right, Paul, the best DFS winger tonight is who? Again, most expensive guy here on Toronto, Mitch Marner, 7,900.
Jessie, he was the player of the month, 23 points in 12 games played in February, an outstanding 4 weeks for Marner, and he's playing lights out right now. So that's a great bet against an overmatched Buffalo team tonight. If you want to look elsewhere, I look at the Dallas team. They've got Robertson playing very well there on the first line, 6 goals in his last 10 games, along with 32 shots on goal, comes in at $6,700. I like Philip Forsberg. I don't understand the love for Seattle tonight. I think the prices on some of these Nashville guys is a lot cheaper than it should be. So Forsberg for me is $6,100 is a bargain.
All right, AJ, you mentioned that you were paying down with Tavares at center. Is this the spot you're paying up at the wing?
It is, absolutely. So I'm going to go all the way up to Marner here at 7,900. But look, you think about it, you're still saving, over $1,000 in salary here compared to using Austin Matthews. So you're still getting a bit of a break and able to pay up here. I think another option, if you don't want to go Leafs, maybe you're going to fade the Leafs, just contrarian play, because I do think they'll all be pretty highly owned tonight. Since the All-Star break, Chris Kreider has gone ice cold. He has just 1 point in his last 6 contests, but that served to just lower his price tag to just $6,300. I think it's good value versus the Blues. They've had their own, defensive struggles. Having said that, like I said, I think Marner is still the best play here. Paul kind of alluded to this: 15 goals, 20 helpers in his last 18 contests. It's why he was the best player in the league for the last month.
All right, let's talk value here now, AJ. Where are you going?
I'm going to go to center for value and look at Braden Shen for 4,600. He scored in all but 2 of his last 14 contests, and that includes his current 4-game point streak. I really am surprised to see him under 5K when you consider everything he's been doing lately. The Rangers are a tough matchup. They've been really good defensively, the tightest D in the league over the month, since February started. But the Blues have had the second best offense in the month of February here in the start of March. 4.38 goals per game for St. Louis over that stretch. So, the unstoppable object, meets the immovable object, or whatever that phrase is. I totally botched that. But I think this is a good spot to maybe get a little bit of some of those Blues with how good their offense has been.
All right, Paul, need some value for the people. Where are you going?
Unstoppable force, immovable object, buddy.
Okay. I didn't know what it was either, to be honest. So
Best value plays tonight. I think you got to look at Nashville. Matt Duchene, $4,900, 8 points in his last 10 games. Tyler Seguin on a tear himself, 29 shots on goal, 8 points in his last 10 games. Braden Shen, I love the call by AJ there, but the two best bets for me are even lower than these guys. At $3,500, Nashville's Mikael Granlund, centered on the top line. He's got 6 points in his last 10 games played, but that Nashville team's capable of running up a big total tonight, and he'll be a part of that. And then Brendan Saad, first line for St. Louis. I like that call as well. Only $3,400 for a guy who plays it physical. The Rangers don't like that, and so I think he could have a big night on Broadway tonight.
all right, Paul, which goal total are you targeting on the DK Sportsbook? They're all 5.5 except for that Buffalo-Toronto, which is 6.5.
Yeah, and that one makes a ton of sense. Buffalo and Toronto is going to be a lot of goal scoring. Peter Mrazek's in net for the Leafs. He hasn't exactly put a lid on the goals against, but he's coming up with some wins, and that's because the Leafs offense is just on a tear. And they might not roll up 10 goals like they did against Detroit, but I think they're good to get about 5 or 6, and then that leaves Buffalo to get 2 or 3, and then they're over 7.5 on the alt line, which is where I'm headed for a plus 185 payoff. And I've been on the Dallas Seattle matchup all over this show. I think Nashville rolls a big number and heads to the alt total almost by themselves. I'm saying over 6.5 to get that 140 payoff.
AJ, what do you think? Which goal total are you targeting?
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't hate taking the over in all 4 games tonight. As Paul said, the Leafs Sabres with that high 6.5 mark, Toronto could get there on their own. And Paul said Mrazek is the confirmed starter tonight, so that's not exactly a ringing endorsement for Buffalo, for a shutout here for Buffalo to be stymied. But as, to talk about one of the other ones, the 5.5 for the Blues and Rangers. Again, Rangers, good offense, good defense, Blues, good offense, but I do think there's still an opportunity here to get, at 5.5 is just so low. 6 goals, I think, is easily reached. But yeah, I think the entire slate is the over option for me.
All right. Is there a puck line or money line that you like tonight, AJ?
I'll be honest, I really don't. There's not a ton of spots here in the puck line or money line that I love. You're giving up 165 to get, with the Leafs, even on the puck line there. So there's just not a good value spot for me. If I had to pick, I would take the Rangers on the money line, minus 110 going up against the Blues. It's basically a coin flip game. I give the edge to the Rangers between the net minding, and they do have decent offense, even if it's been a little down lately. But I'm not confident they could beat them on the puck line. It has a plus 225 payout. I really like that aspect of it, but I'm just not sold that the Rangers could pull off a 2-goal margin of victory here.
All right, Paul, puck line or money line that you like?
I don't like any on the money line, but I'll give you 2 on the puck line that I really like. Nashville, I think, is going to crush Seattle, so I'd give up a goal and a half there to get the plus 145. And Dallas over LA, well, I'm not as keen on that one, but I like the payoff. 185 if Dallas does pull off the win by 2 goals there. They've been playing well, and LA just got bombed at home against Boston. So they're in the road, and I don't know that they're feeling great about themselves.
All righty, thanks you two. That is going to do it for hockey. NFL is next, and we've got a huge PGA Tour segment to wrap the show. But let's head down to Florida and see which golfers our friend Jason Sobel likes this weekend.
So moving off of the favorites onto the next grouping, you have a couple of past winners at this tournament, Mark Leishman, Tyrell Hatton as well. They're in the, let's call it the 20-1 range. Who do you like from that tier?
Yeah, so I'm looking at Will Zalatoris. This is a golf course where ball striking means everything. You've got to drive it well. You've got to hit your irons well. Putting is neutralized essentially on the greens just a little bit. I went back and looked at the putting stats of the players that were in contention last year, and quite frankly, there were only 2 of them that ranked inside the top 10 for the week. Even Bryson DeChambeau, who won, was outside the top 20. So you don't need to putt really well as long as you hit the ball really well at this golf course. And I do think that Will Zalatoris is primed for a big week. Look, 4 of the last 5 winners on the PGA Tour have been first-time winners. Last year in 2021, starting in January, it took 25 events to get to 4 first-timers. I don't know if it's a trend. It's probably more of a coincidence, but I do think at least the coincidence can continue this week. I do like Zalatoris a lot.
Who are you going to fade this week?
It's a great question. Bryson was on my list coming off an injury and the fact that he's only played twice previously in this entire PGA Tour season, not just this year. Bryson out of the field, a withdrawal on Monday, still feels like he needs to get that wrist and the hip to 100% before he starts playing again. I don't feel great about it. Sungjae Im, Adam, has a couple of third-place finishes and a 21st in 3 starts here. A really strong record, but coming off a missed cut last week at the Honda Classic, and I just feel like his number is too low. He's 22-1. Just talked about all those guys. Leishman's got good history here. Jason Kokrak has really good history. Will Zalatoris I like a lot, a great ball striker. And so you look at Sungjae Im with shorter odds than any of those players. He's, I believe, still at 22-1 in the DraftKings Sportsbook. He's a guy that I don't mind this week. I just don't want to chase at that number.
How about some golfers that you're looking at as some potential long shot bets here on the DK Sportsbook? Who stands out?
There are a bunch of them this week, and I'll start it out with, again, chasing some course history here. Keegan Bradley has made the cut 9 straight years, has a couple of top 5 finishes, loves this event. Again, when we look at players who are really good Tita Green and tend to struggle with the flat stick in their hands, he might be right at the top of that list. But again, putting neutralized a little bit this week, and I do think that Keegan Bradley, who opened at 130-1, that's a huge number for Keegan Bradley this week. I like him. Dylan Fratelli coming off a nice week last week. I think that's a good play. Carlos Ortiz, maybe not quite as much of a long shot, a sleeper play, but I know there's some people out there that have been on Carlos Ortiz lately. I like him as well.
Football time, baby. Say hello to the 2 best friends anyone could have. DraftKings contributors Pierce Dietrich and Steve Buchanan. Real quick, before we get to football, yesterday MLB announced that they couldn't get a deal done with the players, so the first 2 series of the year have been canceled. Steve, your reaction to the news yesterday, and please give us the PG version.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've had a lot of time to sit here and think about this, and I was feeling bad for whoever's working in the back because their fingers probably nervously on the dump button just in case something comes out that is not family friendly. But I've had some time. I've got to sit back, and I'm still pissed. This has come to the point where this sport is going to become so irrelevant because they can't get their, you can guess the word, together. These are 2 sides where they're making fist loads of money. Don't let them, tell you otherwise. They are. This sport is making billions and billions of dollars, and I'm not going to sit here and say poor players, poor owners. These 2 sides need to get in, get their stuff together, and bring us a sport that a very small margin of us still actually enjoy and want to keep watching. That being said, if this continues, we've already had this false pretense that these sides weren't able to get it together during the COVID era, and they used COVID as a cover. And now we're going to get a second stoppage or shortened season in the last 2 years. This sport is dying. It's going to do a slow death if they can't get this together.
Pierce, do you agree with the take of the slow death of baseball?
Yeah, but I'm not as worried about it. I could care less about the relevancy of baseball. I am the NASCAR guy, so watching a sport that no one cares about is not really that big of a deal, as long as I still enjoy it. And honestly, missing the first 2 weeks, no big deal. The weather's usually pretty bad anyway. Some of those games get rained out. They're not fun to attend, so I'm cool with that. My biggest concern, though, is that both these teams adapted during the COVID era, and they learned how to make up games and do realignment. And so they know that they can both hold out because when push comes to shove, if they start the season late, they can realign again. They can go 7-inning games, and they can make up all those games. And knowing that they don't have to rush to the table, I don't see them rushing to the table. I'm expecting at least 1 month, 2 months before we get rolling again. All right, the good news is minor league baseball is still playing if you're still fiending for baseball. So you got that USFL coming up. There's plenty of other things to do. Maybe NASCAR.
No.
Okay. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, on to NFL Spin Move. You know how we do it, putting a fantasy and sports betting perspective on NFL news and happenings. So, The Cowboys announced Dak Prescott had a cleanup surgery on his non-throwing shoulder. But one topic of conversation in Indy with Cowboys Executive Vice President Stephen Jones was one of Dak's wideouts, Amari Cooper. So Cooper's under contract, but his $20 million contract becomes fully guaranteed if he's on the roster on March 20th. So cutting or trading Cooper could save the Cowboys $16 million. Now, Pierce, how would a potential cut or trade of Amari Cooper affect the Cowboys' odds or like Dak's fantasy outlook?
It's going to kill his fantasy outlook. You can't get rid of Cooper just to save some money. It would make sense if you could get rid of Cooper and there was someone else out there to get that was cheaper or equal caliber to Cooper's, but it's not there. You let him go, you run the risk of not replacing him at all, or maybe you replace him with an inferior player that's going to cost a lot. You know, Jamison Crowder is expecting $12 million. Christian Kirk is looking at a $12 million salary. So $20 million for Amari Cooper really isn't that bad of a deal. You know what you're going to get. Sure, his numbers were down a little bit last season, but some of that might have had to do with not having a running game. If you can get the running game fixed, that's the real concern. That's going to open up the receivers. That's going to help Dak's numbers. I think it's the idea like the grass is greener on the other side. You expect that you can upgrade, but there just really isn't a free agent upgrade out there. So even if you are overpaying, which you're not, you just stick with Cooper.
All right, Steve, do you agree? You just got to stick with Cooper here?
Well, the other thing is too is that there's a couple other receivers on Dallas, or that were on Dallas, that are also going to be free agents. Michael Gallup is one of them. Noah Brown, not a big name, but he's going to be out there. Cedric Wilson, another one. So they're potentially losing a bunch of their receivers. They can't afford to also lose Cooper as well. Now, the Cowboys are one of those teams that is in cap space hell, kind of down there with the Saints. They don't have a lot of wiggle room, really much at all. I mean, when the numbers are in red, usually that's bad news if you're trying to get anybody on the free agent market. So they really can't afford to make any moves to begin with. Now, if they do cut Cooper and save some of that money, sure, that does free up some. But, I mean, you really need to retain some of these guys because, like Pierce mentioned, that run game, when it wasn't when Ezekiel Elliott was on the field, wasn't exactly stellar, to say the least. So I think they got to try to retain Cooper here. He's a big part of this Dallas offense, even if the numbers didn't exactly equate to that this season.
All right, well, the offseason is a time of people putting things on social media and it making a statement. So Carson Wentz put a picture on Instagram of him working with Colts receivers, including Michael Pittman. So his future does seem to be up in the air in Indy because of his salary and, of course, his quarterbacking. So, Steve, do you think the Colts need an upgrade at the quarterback position, or can they win with Wentz?
What are they going to win with Wentz? Wentz won them absolutely nothing this season. Take Jonathan Taylor out of that team. Pluck him right out. And tell me what the Colts would have ended up with this season. Maybe 2 or 3 wins. Wentz is not that guy. Wentz is never going to be that guy. So they absolutely need to make a change at quarterback. I kind of bring it back to the 49ers. If the game is on the line, do you trust your quarterback to go downfield and win that game? You can say no to the Colts, and you can absolutely say no to the 49ers. They need to make an upgrade at quarterback. They have some good receivers over there, but it doesn't even feel like it because of how much Jonathan Taylor dominated, because they can't rely on Wentz, and then just the overall poor play by Carson Wentz. So they absolutely need to make an upgrade at quarterback this offseason.
Pierce, you'd agreement, absolutely need to make an upgrade at quarterback?
Yeah, they need to get better quarterback play. It's probably not going to come from Wentz, but the issue is not that they want to get rid of him. It's just, what are you going to do? They don't have any draft picks. They don't have any draft picks to trade. Wentz has an insane salary that no one wants, and so you have to eat that salary if you can even get someone to bite on Wentz. They're pretty much stuck with him. You look at possible places for them to trade him, there really is only one move, and this is pure galaxy brain, but it's another quarterback that's not wanted, who has a really bad salary that's hard to move. You just swap him with Sam Darnold, which sounds crazy because Sam Darnold's been terrible as well. But you look at Sam Darnold in the limited sample size we have, he's had bad coaching, he's had bad offensive lines, he has possibly some upside. We know that Wentz doesn't have upside. There is nothing more to get from him. There's the chance that Darnold could be better if he had a good coach and a good offensive line. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, you're not going to win with Wentz. You might as well lose with Darnold and have a chance of maybe resurrecting his career.
All right, really quick before we move on, Steve, what do you think of the Darnold play?
I mean, you're just inserting one bad quarterback for another. But I mean, that's kind of where they're at right now, right? So I don't think it's a terrible play, but it's like, we can replace Wentz with Darnold. You got some bigger issues going on.
Okay, well, guys, Packers reportedly preparing to have a short-term deal ready for Aaron Rodgers if he decides to return to Green Bay. So the NFL is waiting on Rodgers, but let's talk about the Packers that are returning next season. So, Pierce, how do you view Aaron Jones's fantasy potential with and then without Aaron Rodgers next year?
He should be fine, maybe possibly. I'm not really bullish on Jones at all, with A.J. Dillon emerging mainly as probably the key running back. You're going to have Jones still getting rushing attempts, but he's turning into a receiving back, which is fine, right? That works in fantasy as long as Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback. If Rodgers isn't the quarterback and we need receptions from Aaron Jones, I don't know if he's going to have that same role. Are we going to get the checkdowns? Is he going to get used in the passing game the same way? I would be really worried about that. And even best case scenario, everything stays in place. He's looking like a Jamal Williams that basically catches more passes. And being a receiving back is really game script dependent. I would much rather have the running back that's going to get the rushing attempts, which you're going to get a lot more action throughout the game as opposed to playing in catch-up mode or blowouts or whatever. So I don't really like Jones that much.
Steve, what do you think?
I agree with Pierce. I think A.J. Dillon has proven to be the better pure running back overall. If Aaron Rodgers comes back, then this is going to be another pass-heavy offense. Like, you're not going to bring Aaron Rodgers back and switch to a run game primarily at all. That's not the whole point of having Aaron Rodgers, because he can air that ball out or whatnot, get deep downfield. But it also comes down to, what are they going to do with their receivers? Like, if they don't end up having Devontae Adams for whatever reason, is that going to lead to more for Aaron Jones? But I think with Jones, I don't think we're going to see the true potential with him, with Aaron Rodgers, because this team's going to want to pass if they have Aaron Rodgers. But I agree with Pierce. I think that A.J. Dillon has been the stronger back, at least during the second half of last season. He definitely looked like the guy that should be out there more. So I think, if anything, Aaron Jones might have to watch out for A.J. Dillon, who's also a very avid card collector, and I like that.
Oh, love that about him. Fun fact, Steve. So experts say that this year's quarterback draft class isn't as strong as the last few years, but plenty of mock drafts with multiple quarterbacks going in the first round. So Steve, whether it's like via draft, trade, free agency, which team do you feel like is going to have the biggest turnaround next season with a new quarterback?
So I think when you look at the first round picks for every team, the only team that I feel like is almost guaranteed to take a quarterback has to be the Saints, right? Because, I mean, they are in, we talked about the Dallas Cowboys being tough for cap space. The Saints are in like a whole different universe. That's why Sean Payton was like, I'm done. I'm out. See you later. I'm gone. They need a quarterback, and I think they need it more than any of them. So I don't think it's going to lead to the biggest turnaround, but I think of all the teams in the first round to draft a quarterback in the first round, I think the Saints are the only team that you can really say that team needs a quarterback. There are other teams that absolutely need quarterbacks. Steelers, Falcons are some of the names that quickly come to mind, but of the situations and of the cap space, I think that is the position that the Saints need to address the most. So while I'll say that I don't think it's going to bring the biggest turnaround, I think they're almost guaranteed to take a quarterback in the first round. So I'm going to roll with the Saints in this spot.
All right, Pierce, what do we think?
No one's going to make a major turnaround. You might see a bad team win a couple more games, but the talent's just not there. Free agent market, it's not there. If you're trading, you're going to get somebody that no one really wanted, so that's not really going to turn around your team. And then draft-wise, if the experts say that this quarterback talent in the draft isn't that good, then you got to take their word for it. They're usually right. I mean, everyone knows that they missed on Brady. Great. But for the most part, all the other times, the quarterbacks, as far as being evaluated, they got it right. And sometimes, they like a guy and he doesn't work out, but very rarely are they down on a guy and then all of a sudden he explodes and turns a team around. So I'm going to take the expert's word for it and expect really a bad year for quarterbacks improving teams.
All right, good stuff. You two, one more block to go here on The Sweat, getting our golf panel's DFS picks for the Arnold Palmer Invitational next. say hello to our PGA panel, DraftKings contributor Jeff Ulrich and Reed Fowler, and RotoWire senior golf writer Len Hochberg. Fellas, PGA Tour price check time. Need your best DFS plays for each price range for the Arnold Palmer Invitational at Bay Hill, teeing off tomorrow. So Rahm's the top price golfer at $11,400. Now let's include Sung J M, who sits right under that 10K range at $9,900. So, who's your favorite play from those 6 golfers at the top, Jeff?
I mean, I don't really love any of these guys this week, if I'm being honest. I think it's a good week to almost fade the top bunch. I know we've got a lot of elite players in here, but you would create unique lineups if you did that. I'm looking at Scheffler and Matsuyama for the simple fact that we're getting a price break on them over Rahm and Rory. I know Rory has kind of made Bay Hill his playground, and I think obviously him and Rahm both make for very safe cash game plays. But I feel like the upside with Scheffler and Matsuyama at cheaper prices is pretty solid this week. I mean, Tita Green, these guys have been very good. I would lean Scheffler slightly as the target for me. When Scotty Scheffler has been sort of in form, you look even just throughout his short career, he's typically rallied together some top tens. He's got some pretty strong, putting splits over his last little bit. He just looks uber confident. He was in contention here in 2020 as well, kind of fell apart, but that year a lot of people fell apart in the wind. I think Scotty Scheffler at 10-6 gives you a good price break over the top 2 guys and carries a lot of upside just with the way he's playing.
Reed, you want to go contrarian and fade all those guys at the top?
No, Jeff's a moron. You can't fit all those guys at the top. No, I get what he's saying. He's not a moron. I get what he's saying. And it makes a lot of sense when you take a look at how you want to be unique in this lineup, because a lot of guys up here have been talked about quite a bit, right? Namely Rory. I remember my article, and it's hard not to write up Rory because all the stats line up that he's going to play well. He always does. That's sort of a quote unquote cop out, not to, really put myself on the back burner here. But if I'm going from a GPP standpoint, I mean, Victor Hovland is a guy who's not necessarily someone that you see pumped up quite a bit on the DFS side. Betting, yeah, for whatever reason, when he's at plus 1,800, plus 1,500, people want to bet him. But on the DFS side, when you have those guys, he's in that sandwich pricing of 10-8. I get why Matsuyama's here. Tita Green, he's a master at this course, but he just can't putt. This guy is about, when you talk about total driving, when you talk about distance and accuracy, he's one of the best in his short career right now, up the guys at the top. So give me Victor Hovland, because right now his roster percentage, his projected roster percentage looks lowest of the top 5. All
right, Len, what's your strategy here?
Well, if I wasn't completely awake on the West Coast just yet, Jeff woke me up by saying, let's skip all these guys. I mean, I'm kind of think I could see a reason for any of them, and all of them. They're all playing pretty well right now. Maybe the only one who's not playing well is Jon Rahm, and fade the number 1 guy at your own peril at any time. That said, as Reed said, Rory just aligns so nicely with this course. He's top 10 almost every year, and I also do like Victor Hovland. Putting is an issue with Hovland, but he's putting much better lately. He's now 34th on tour in strokes gained putting. The wedge play still an issue. But of the top 6 guys, I also like Sung J M. Sung J M really burned me. I only told half the world that Sung J M was going to do great at the Honda, and that didn't quite pan out. But it still holds true this week. This course, a Tita Green course, aligns really nicely with his game, and it shows when he had a couple of top 3s in 2 of the past 3 years. So there's a lot to like for me in that. I get the ownership is going to be high, but just from who's going to do well on the leaderboard, I like these guys.
Quick prediction, Jesse. Victor Hovland, missed cut, losing strokes around the green in Phoenix. Now comes to a tougher course in Bay Hill. Whew, I don't like it.
All right, mark the tape. Mark the tape. We're going to clip that, and we're going to tweet it out. All right.
Well, it's not fair, Jeff, because Jeff mentions every single guy that he likes in this range. So it's really like,
wait till we get to the next range. I like everyone in the next range. So
yeah,
okay, we'll get to it.
Okay, yeah, Jeff, go ahead. Let's move to the middle of the pack. A lot of good players to choose from between 8K, 9,500. Who's the pick in that range?
Yeah, look, if I'm throwing out crazy ideas like maybe fading everybody over 10K this week, obviously we have to target some guys in the 9K range. Will Zalatoris and Matthew Fitzpatrick are one neck and neck for top plays this week. Zalatoris just playing beautifully. Tita Green, the approach play is off the charts. Was T10 here last year. I understand the putter has to show up, but look, Willie Z has shown that he can get a little bit hot with that flat stick at some point. And if it happens this week, I think he's going to have a very good shot of bringing home his first win. And then on the other side, Matthew Fitzpatrick, I'm just going to flat out say probably still my top play this week. I get that some people are he's a polarizing player, but Tita Green, he has started the season probably better than he ever has. And in terms of putting, we don't have to worry about that because this guy leads basically almost all the career splits in terms of putting on Bermuda surfaces. He's just a really good all-around player around the greens. So if that approach game and like the total driving stats keep up for Fitzpatrick here, if his putter gets hot, I mean, I think he's got a great chance of winning too. So pair Willie Z and Matthew Fitz, and I think that's a good way to start a balanced lineup this week.
All right, Len, what do you think in that 8 to 9,500 range?
Yeah, I'm a little bit more in alignment with Jeff there. I do like Zalatoris. Yeah, the putter is an issue. I don't know if he can putt well enough to win this tournament. I think you're going to have to putt a little bit. At this, traditionally you do, maybe not last year, but over the last decade, the winners have been good putters. But the rest of his game is good enough for a top 10, and he's down at 9,400. I think you can make that work in your lineup. Matt Fitzpatrick, every year, top 10 in this tournament as well. Right below him at 9,100, Mark Leishman, I think, is really getting overlooked, maybe even by me. He has won this tournament. He's finished second. He's not really at the top of his game right now, but he is and I think he will be low owned compared to a lot of the guys we've already mentioned there. And, moving all the way down to 8,100, I think every time I'm here, I say Keith Mitchell, and he's at 81. I'm going to say him again, like him a lot this week. 4 top 12s already in 2022 alone.
All right, Reed, what say you about this range?
Yeah, this is Jeff. This is Jeff's MO. I've worked with Jeff, I think, every single day for the last 5 years, and it's the same story. This guy says Victor Hovland is poured around the green. You know what Matty Fitzpatrick has done, Jeff, for the last 24 rounds? He's 97th. He's lost in 4 of his last 6 measured rounds for Matty Fitzpatrick. But, hey, if you want to save the $1,000 and go for Matt Fitzpatrick for a T10 again, I get it. Look, and we're talking about DFS, so it does make a little sense. That's what you got to do. You got to give Jeff a little jab to the side, but then pick him back up when he falls down because he needs it. So Matty Fitzpatrick, not a bad call. No one's talking about the beige bomber, Adam Scott. This guy is coming in like wearing maybe a different sweater than beige. Maybe it's like maroon red this week. But this guy is fantastic. When you talk about at this course, it sets up for someone like Scotty, right? It sets up for someone who has that type of game where driving is, it is a premium here. And one of the best drivers over the last, 100 years has been Adam Scott. It's just the matter of, can this guy, like we always talk about with a golfer of his profile, can he make putts? And at this course, and even if you take a look at what he did at Genesis, he gained like 7.5 strokes putting, right? So the broomstick is working, the approach game is working for Scotty, and he finished with the top 3 here. So if you follow Jeff at the Fantasy Grind, he puts out these trends at the beginning of the week, and Scotty kind of fits one of those trends, right? Of having a top 5 at this tournament. It was like back in 2000 and whatever it was, like 8 or 11. So it was a while back, but I like Scotty right there at 9. I think he's at 9 flat. Yeah, $9,000. Give me Scotty.
All right. Is there a golfer that you like under 7,500 for like some value here, Len?
Yeah, there are a couple of guys. I do want to mention one just above 7,500, and that is Justin Rose at 77. I think he's another guy who's going to be under the radar. And if you look at him the last few years here, he withdrew from the tournament. He missed the cut the previous year, but last year he was in the top 10 when he woke up on Saturday with a bad back and had to withdraw. He couldn't play. He tried a few holes and had to leave, but he's had good success at this course through the years, played it a ton, a second, a third, some other top 10s, but moving down into the range you asked about, 7,500, Chris Kirk, he did it again last week. He finished 7th, and that was with a triple late in the tournament. For whatever reason, he has the best tee to green numbers of his career, and he's been around a long time. This is a perfect example of a course where you need to be strong tee to green, 7,500, and all the way down at 7,100. Lanto Griffin usually does his best work early in the season, but he was 21st here last year. He's made cuts 2 of the 2 times, and he's coming off a pretty good West Coast swing where he had a couple of top 20s. I like him as well at 71.
All right, Jeff, value. Where are you going?
So when you're going under 7,500, I think that the safer plays are guys like Lucas Glover and Keegan Bradley. Great course history. great Tita Green players. I mean, if their putter shows up, they could easily challenge for like a top 20, maybe even a top 10. But I think for GPPs, I'm going to throw it out. I think Ricky Fowler pops this week. And Len mentioned this. You've got to be able to handle the greens at Bay Hill. These things are fast. And typically we see most of the players in the top 10, they're gaining like multiple strokes on the greens. Ricky changed putters 2 weeks ago. He gained over 5 strokes on the greens at PGA National. I think that confidence seeps through here. He's in a home game here, like near his house in Florida. The approach game and the Tita game wasn't that bad on the West Coast. And now he's made 2 cuts in a row. I really do. I'm not suggesting Ricky Fowler challenges for the win this week, but I think at 6,900, he pops a little bit here. And I think he's going to pay off this salary. So obviously, we're talking like a player who's probably going to be like 2% owned in GPPs. And that's the only place you should be deploying Ricky Fowler is in like a high variance, big field GPP lineup. But I'm going to go out and say Ricky Fowler pops with the top 20 this week.
Okay, Reed, golfer under 7,500.
I gotta let Jeff, and he's staying with Ricky Fowler. He's been touting him for like a month. I love it.
Don't leave your wingman.
Yeah, no kidding. If you follow at Len Hochberg on Twitter, you'll see that under $7,000, Party Marty Laird is someone that I do like. He won this tournament way back when, but let's stick above 7,000 because that's a little bit dicey just because it's been a while since we've seen Martin Laird do anything on the PGA Tour. It's Ian Poulter. And look, Poulter is someone that you can easily pencil in, like around the green short game, right? Putting is going to be his thing. But let's take a look at what he did last week. He gained through approach. He was 26th at Honda. He didn't play well, right? If you look at his stats and you look deeper, he did not play well. His scorecard had like more squares and circles, so more bogeys or bogeys plus than it did the others, right? Which is birdies and pars. The thing about Poulter, though, when he gets, like we talk about, into Florida, onto these Bermuda greens, when putting is a premium and you don't necessarily have everything with ball striking, those are the guys you want that can pop with the putter. And we know Poulter, he's one of the best. And when he's in Florida, you got to give him a nod. So I believe he's right around that 7K number. So give me Ian Poulter.
All right, who is winning the Arnold Palmer Invitational? And thus you absolutely need them in your DFS lineup, Jeff.
Matthew Fitzpatrick, and especially after Reed besmirched his around the green play. Matthew Fitzpatrick doesn't have to play good around the green, so he'll just sink all his 40 footers. So stuff that in your sack there, Reed.
All right, Reed, what do you think?
Where's the sack to stuff?
Stuff it in your sack.
Yeah, stuff it in your sack, Santa. Give me Sanjay. Len, we got to stick with this guy, right? I told the other half of the world to play Sanjay, and that didn't work out. So the entire world is probably mad at both of us. But give me Sanjay. It's too hard to fade Sanjay on Bermuda and Florida. So give me Sanjay in.
All right, Len, who you going with?
Yeah, it's so hard to go back to a guy who burned you last week. So I'm going to just go to another guy who burns me all the time, and Rory McIlroy. And, just the fact that I'm picking him means something terribly will go awry, probably around 16 or 17 on Sunday. But just everything aligns here. He's really playing very well everywhere in the world right now. He is 5th in the world. He's ahead of Justin Thomas, ahead of Dustin Johnson, ahead of DeChambeau, Koepka. He is really at the top of his game or near the top of his game just when he has to be.
All right, everybody's getting burned this weekend. Good stuff, guys. Just kidding. Madden starts at noon. Bills at Lions. The slate is at 5 p.m. for more golf with Reed and Jeff and possibly Emerson. And I'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Still no Emerson.